With over 30 years of experience in real estate and the mortgage industry, Darlene Mays provides knowledge and expert guidance to clients looking to buy or sell a home. Serving clients throughout South Orange County, Darlene specializes in the senior community of Laguna Woods Village. Darlene works with her clients to ensure the highest level of service, from the beginning of the process right down to the closing table. If you are looking to buy or sell, who you work with really does matter. Call Darlene Mays today.
Welcome in. Today we have a fascinating guest. He's an author, an amazing researcher, and his latest book is called Fighting for Justice. I'm just going to let you hear from him directly. Mark Shaw, welcome so much to the show. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. Have great respect for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I have found you on YouTube, and I was totally fascinated with everything you brought up. You have a lot of new information regarding the assassination in 1963 of John Kennedy. I know we all know where we were when we heard that John Kennedy was assassinated, and we all believed the Warren Commission, everything that was fed to us. It's just like we were robots. Why don't you tell us the new information you have, and how not only the assassination of JFK is involved, but there's a lot of other deaths involved and a lot of mysteries that you are now trying to solve.
Well, thank you, Francine. I got into this by accident, frankly. I've been an author since my first book was when I was 47 years old in 1992 about the Mike Tyson trial. And I wasn't ever going to be that interested in the JFK assassination. I remember where I was. I was a freshman at Purdue University and heard it over the radio and started crying like everybody else and all of that. But frankly, you move on, and I moved on with my life and had some wonderful things happen through the years. It was only until I met this woman, frankly, this woman right here, who's Dorothy Kilgallen. Many people, and I wrote a book about her that became a bestseller, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much. Dorothy came into my life in a little bit of an interesting way. My life's been filled with these serendipitous moments, defining moments, I call them. I would have never looked into the JFK assassination if it hadn't been for meeting Dorothy. And the way it happened, I've had an advantage over every other person who's ever investigated the JFK assassination, written books, given lectures, whatever. I knew personally Melvin Belli, the attorney for Jack Ruby. I practiced law with him in the 1980s in nearby San Francisco here. And so when I decided to write a book about him and a biography of him after he died in 1996, I'm going through his life. I knew a lot of his colleagues. I interviewed them all and everything. And then there was one gentleman who said to me, a doctor friend of his, well, Melvin Belli knew Dorothy Kilgallen. And I said, well, the only thing I know about her is that she was a main panelist on the hit CBS show What's My Line in the 1950s and 60s. It was watched by 10 million people every Sunday night live. I remember my parents watching that show. It was a quiz show. And
let me. People can now go on YouTube and watch all the episodes because they're still very much alive for us to watch now.
Well, and I'm very proud of that because we're going to talk about how Dorothy died at some point very mysteriously, and I've proven she was murdered. She disappeared from the face of the earth. When I started investigating her and her life, there was nothing out there. And there weren't that many episodes up there and all of that. So I found out about Dorothy, and this guy said to me, no, Mark, Melvin Belli wasn't on What's My Line. He knew her from the Jack Ruby trial. Well, I've watched some of your episodes, and I've seen that you're a very curious person. You want to find out what's going on. And when I learned that Belli knew Dorothy at the JFK assassination, at the trial of Jack Ruby and all of that, I wondered how in the world did that happen? So very quickly, I started investigating Dorothy and found out that she was, at the time of the Ruby trial, what the New York Post called the most powerful female voice in America. Ernest Hemingway said she was the greatest female writer in the world. And all of these accolades and everything. She had a column in the New York Journal American, a college dropout who achieved all of this despite all of the gender discrimination at the time. And she had this column in the New York Journal American called Voice of Broadway, syndicated to 200 newspapers across the country by the Hearst Syndicate. And that's when they really read newspapers. And she had a radio show with her husband, Richard Calmer, a Broadway producer, listened to by 1 million people each day. Dorothy was the real deal. And when I found out that she looked into the JFK assassination, I went back and checked with my research on Melvin Belli and found he had a connection to the underworld. He liked to be a mafia wannabe, and I kind of knew that about him. He's a bigger than life guy, very seldom ever told the truth about anything. And so I started looking in then to Belli's involvement with the JFK assassination, and it led me back to the 1960 presidential election. And if you remember then, Richard Nixon and JFK, it was close, very close. And Joe Kennedy, the Kennedy patriarch, knew that if they didn't win Illinois and West Virginia, they would lose the election. Through Frank Sinatra, who one of the most distasteful men in history, in my opinion.
We'll talk about him later.
Led Joe to the mafia with Sam Giancana, Carlos Marcello, Trafficante, all the bad mafia guys at the time. And they all helped JFK win Illinois and West Virginia with the promise from Joe that if they did that, they would be left alone when the new administration got in the White House. Well, Joe was a very dishonorable man, as one has ever been, and a liar and all that. So he double-crossed them. And one of the things he did, and I had a witness who was right there, I don't speculate in my book, and Dorothy knew this, that JFK was forced by Joe Kennedy to appoint Bobby Kennedy Attorney General. And Bobby Kennedy hated those mafioso at the McClellan hearings and racketeering hearings and everything. And so immediately, what did he do with the double cross? He went ahead and he deported Carlos Marcello, the New Orleans mafia king, to Guatemala. He almost died down there. Marcello got back in the country, and I then was able to switch over from that. I wrote a book called The Poisoned Patriarch about the 60 election, but then I started wondering, how does Dorothy Kilgallen fit into all of this? And what I found out was that she and JFK were very close friends. He had been to her home to play charades. He'd seen her at the Cafe Society watering holes in New York City. And the biggest one that made the difference, Francine, was that at one point, Pierre Salinger set it up for Dorothy and her youngest son, Kerry, to go to the White House. And when they did, all at once, there was JFK in the library making a fuss over her little son, who's in the 3rd grade, looking at the letters he brought and all of that. Well, that meant so much to Dorothy and also to Kerry. And so when JFK died, Dorothy wrote one of her first columns about the JFK assassination. And what she said was, "What I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy, praising him for the 3rd grade letters he brought. This is the man who, not the president, this is the man who was assassinated in Dallas." Well, as Bennett Cerf, one of the panel members on What's My Line, said, when Dorothy went after a story, she went after it full bore, just like you do. And she had integrity, just like you do. How many people have said to me, we wish we had a reporter like Dorothy Kilgallen today that had that kind of integrity?
I wish we did.
Yeah. So right away, what she did is she went to the Ruby trial. And while she was there, Francine, to show the trust that people had in her, Jack Ruby gave her the only interview out of 400 reporters at the trial. And he did it twice and talked to her about the things that really were involved with with what his part was in the JFK assassination. And so that was a big deal for me when I found that out. Well, we're going to find out later that Dorothy's investigation files, it was an 18-month investigation. She wrote columns. The Oswald file must not close. She didn't buy all of that, as J. Edgar Hoover was stating, and all of that. So basically, she was on the inside ropes of the JFK assassination and the Ruby trial. So at that particular point, then I went ahead and we're going to find out that all of her documents were stolen, basically, in a raid by J. Edgar Hoover on the day she died. But she went to New Orleans. And who did she look into? She didn't look into LBJ. She didn't look into the military complex. She didn't look into the Cubans. She knew that Jack Ruby was the key to the JFK assassination because she had interviewed him. She didn't go after Oswald. She found him to be confusing. So long story short there, she was at New Orleans. She interviewed somebody who connected Marcello, Oswald, and Ruby. And then she made the biggest mistake of her life, one that Marilyn Monroe, who I've connected to Dorothy Kilgallen's death, and showed that it wasn't a suicide at all, based on Dorothy's columns that she wrote right before Marilyn died. She went back to New York and she was a blabbermouth. I'm writing a book for Random House. I've got all the material that I need to show that J. Edgar Hoover was involved in the JFK assassination cover-up. Marcello was the one who had the strongest motive to have killed JFK, so Bobby Kennedy would be powerless, because if he killed Bobby, the government would come after him with everything they had. But if he kills JFK, Bobby is powerless. That's exactly what happened. So she knew all of this. And she told her hairdresser, one of them, if the wrong people knew what I know about the JFK assassination, it would cost me my life. I'm afraid for my life and my family. I've bought a gun. I'm afraid for my son. I'm afraid. But she kept going on and on that she was going to bust wide open what happened with the JFK assassination. And we can talk about what happened, but just a few months later, she was found dead in her Manhattan townhouse in a bedroom she never slept in, wearing makeup, eyelashes, and a hairpiece she never wore to bed. A book was on her lap upside down. There obviously a staged death scene, but when the medical examiner came and the police finally came in the afternoon, they decided, hey, this is just another celebrity who overdosed on drugs. And so the verdict of the medical examiner given out to the media was she died of an overdose of drugs, circumstances undetermined. Well, that lit a light in my mind. And so I looked into her death, and as we can talk about if you want to, but she took it, how she died, and why I believe and have proven she was murdered. But she took it personal when JFK died. And if you know anything about Dorothy, well, just watch My Line. She was kind of a prosecutor on there. She was the one who went after all the facts. She's the one who guessed the occupations and all of that. And she did that with every story she went after. And for 18 months, she looked into the JFK assassination. She had the truth. She was going to print it in that book. And she was the reporter who knew too much, and they had to silence her.
Well, yeah, and Bennett Cerf, also on What's My Line, was the co-founder of Random House. And I believe you've said in previous interviews that she showed her documents and her manuscript to him. And when she was found dead, as you said, Hoover's men came in and took all her notes and everything. But if Bennett Cerf had seen all this, and this is what I'm really curious about, why didn't he follow up?
Well, great question. You have to realize with Dorothy, the last night of her life, there was a man that she had a relationship with. He was a journalist from the Midwest, much younger than she was. I think he got involved in Dorothy's death by those who thought that he might be helpful in finding out what she was doing. And on the last night of her life, I think he was involved with her murder. But as far as the whole situation with Bennett Cerf, there is evidence that she showed him part of the manuscript for the book she was writing about the JFK assassination. So it's logical to think that he would do something about that he would look into it afterwards. This is what's so sad. Nobody in her family, none of her colleagues at What's My Line, including Bennett Cerf, none of her journalistic colleagues, nobody stood up for Dorothy and said, wait a minute, overdose of drugs, no way that can happen at all. In fact, I want to mention that when I gave a presentation here up at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco, they called me a magnet for crowdsourcing. And people say my books are very easily read because I don't have much of a vocabulary, frankly, a small town in Indiana guy. But I get these emails, and people watch the presentations on YouTube. I think there's about 8 million of them up there now, views. And I hear from people. And here's what I just heard from this morning. This guy's name is T.K. Behringer. He's a retired physician. I can verify that most doctors' handwritten notes are frequently illegible. I am surprised you were able to decipher the medical examiner's note as well as you did, as displayed on page 88. I believe the 3 words of the last sentence on page 99 referenced as undistinguishable are no pox HX, which would mean no positive history of alcoholism or other medicinal habits. Doctors routinely abbreviate history as HX, positive as pos, and negative. So that's what's, I keep getting this more information that there's no way she could have overdosed on drugs. But again, you hope if somebody says something bad about you, Francine, that there will be others who will stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not her. She's not like that. But in this situation, Bennett Cerf and all of them were scared because they knew, all of them knew she was investigating the JFK assassination. And I think Bennett Cerf knew about the connection he'd made with this Marcello as the man with the main motive to kill JFK. So he was scared. He never came forward. Her reputation was ruined. And I have been fighting for 15 years to try to get that reputation returned to her as the kind of incredible woman and reporter that she was.
Well, I have to tell you that, about 25 years ago, I was interviewing an FBI agent who had been involved with the mafia undercover.
Oh.
And I happened to say, have you heard anything about JFK assassination? And he says, oh, yeah, it's common knowledge within the mob. They talk about it all the time. And I said, so Hoover knew about it? He says, Hoover knew about it. Everybody knew about it. But we didn't. The public didn't know about it. And then let's LBJ put together the Warren Commission, which was a fake. Why don't you talk a little bit about the Warren Commission and what was tasked to do?
Well, here they are on the cover of Fighting for Justice.
Right.
And once again, I don't understand all of this, frankly, Francine, how I've become this magnet for all this new information and everything. I was not going to write this book. I had written enough about Dorothy, about Marilyn's death and connecting it to JFK and Dorothy's death through the book Collateral Damage for the first time, showing that on the day or two before Marilyn died, Dorothy wrote a column about her, how great she was doing. She was going to Hollywood parties. She had a new love affair in her life. She had Broadway offers, everything. And I said to myself, this is not a woman who would have committed suicide. And we can talk about that a bit. But in this situation, I was not going to write this book. And then I got an email in February of last year. A gentleman said, I knew Dorothy Kilgallen in 1962. And of course, that perked my interest because there aren't too many people alive now that knew Dorothy. So I phoned him and he said, yes, Mr. Shaw, I did. But let me tell you another thing. I feel not like it's now the right time that I can come out and tell the truth about the Warren Commission. I was the legislative assistant for one of the Warren Commission members. I first worked for Bobby Kennedy in the Justice Department. In fact, JFK and RFK used to use me as the go-between between the Justice Department and the White House. I would run back and forth with messages or ride my bicycle because they thought that J. Edgar Hoover was probably tapping their phones. Mm-hmm. So that made me of interest. And he said, then Bobby Kennedy recommended me to this Warren Commission member that we'll identify in a minute. And I worked for him for several months. And I was there when he was going back and forth to the Warren Commission hearings. I rode with him in his Saab. He was a tall man. He couldn't quite fit in. And Dorothy was a stickler for detail and the small things. And that's what I've tried to do. She's been my guru. She's been my mentor. I even feel like you may think I'm wacky or whatever, but she chose me to write her story. And I feel like many times she's guided me to evidence. Well, I think she guided me to this because he told me, I was with this senator during the hearings. And Mr. Shaw, I have some things I need to tell you that I need to get off of my chest because it's really bothered me. This senator said to me, The commission members already know about the Jack Ruby connection to organized crime, but they don't want to touch it. It's more than Oswald, but J. Edgar Hoover and Chief Justice Earl Warren keep pushing the Oswald alone conclusion. Our new president, Lyndon Johnson, now wants to cover up the truth. And then he said, the commission members say this Oswald alone conclusion is going to be good for God and country, but there is internal corruption, and I don't know why. Now, in Fighting for Justice, I actually have audio tape conversations between LBJ and Hoover as they're stacking the deck with members that they know will go along with the Oswald alone conclusion. And people can see those transcripts in Fighting for Justice, and you'll see that they go down through the people. Well, we can trust this guy, but we can't trust this one, because he'll go to the media. He's got a big mouth or whatever, and they just go down through there. Alan Dulles, for God's sakes, the former CIA director, they put him on there. He was fired by JFK. A complete conflict of interest. Jerry Ford, who was very little thought of at that particular time. Some of these guys, and we'll talk about the one in a minute. So he said to me, plus, Mr. Shaw, I went to this senator's home in Georgetown. I knew him very well. They invited me because I was a bachelor and they needed bachelors. And JFK would come and I would be there. And then I sat right next to Dorothy Kilgallen at the dinner table. And my jaw dropped. He said, yeah, she was a bright light bulb. That was what he called her. And, she kept kind of interviewing me during the entree, because that's what she was like. And that was at 29th and N Street in Georgetown. And so one of the things I did after I talked to this man, Morris Wolf, who's still alive today at 87, although his health isn't great, I looked to see what the senator's address was in Georgetown, 29th and N Street. So I knew that what he was telling me was the truth. And then here's what he did. He said, Mr. Shaw, at the time I didn't have the cover of this book, obviously. You see Hoover, Marilyn, Dorothy, and Bobby Kennedy there, who was obviously, I've proven, was involved in Marilyn Monroe's death. But here's the Warren Commission. He said, go into the internet and find that photograph. And you can look at it now, because you're going to see that every one of the members is standing by themselves. But he said, look to the far right of the photograph, and you will see one man almost hiding behind another. And that is Senator John Sherman Cooper of Kentucky. Senator John Sherman Cooper of Kentucky. And that's the man that I was the legislative assistant for. And he said, he was a man of integrity, like Dorothy Kilgallen. He couldn't stand what they were doing. In fact, I've been able then to go ahead and confirm his account by finding documents. The best place to find documents certainly isn't Wikipedia. So I go to the National Archives, or I've gone to the University of Georgia and University of Kentucky, where they have oral histories. One of them is John Sherman Cooper. And in there is documents that I have that are in the book where he is so dubious of what's happening at the Warren Commission. Morris Wolf told me that many times he got to sit and listen to the hearings, and he was just amazed that there were very few members there. It was mostly staff members. But here's a memo that I have in there, and basically it talks about the fact that they know about the CIA involvement with the Justice Department and Bobby Kennedy and all that. Warren and Katzenbach know all about the FBI and apparently planning to show Oswald as the only one to be considered. This is an untenable position. I must insist on outside counsel. I have his letter of resignation that he finally didn't send. I was able to find that he and Senator Richard Russell of Georgia were demanding a separate opinion, like a dissenting opinion, stating that they did not believe in the silver bullet theory, which of course means they didn't believe the Oswald alone theory. They demanded it being, Francine, in the final Warren Commission report. When the report came out, it was nowhere to be seen. Now just think about that, because if that had been in there, that there was some feeling among the members that they didn't believe in the Oswald thing. Think how much that would have changed, because that Oswald alone theory, a ludicrous theory, has been perpetuated through so many years Hell, it's at the sixth floor museum in Dallas, which is just a shrine to Oswald. So that's all those years. So unfortunately, history would have been changed a great deal if that descent would have been in there.
Absolutely. And we should point out that this is the 60th anniversary of the assassination of John Kennedy. Well, this is fascinating. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but you are coming right back because we're going to continue because you've got so much to tell. And I know the viewers are just eating this up. So we will come back another time with Mark Shaw to continue this fascinating look into what happened with the JFK assassination, its aftermath, and I don't know if you call it collateral damage, but all the other people that have been entangled in this horrific event in American history. So we will see you soon. Well, this has just been a fascinating conversation with Mark Shaw, and we have to have him back because there's so much more to delve into. After all, it was an amazing part of American history with the assassination of the president and all those little people involved. So we will have him back and learn more about the conspiracies, the cover-ups, everything involved with John F. Kennedy. So in the meantime, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.
With over 30 years of experience in real estate and the mortgage industry, Darlene Mays provides knowledge and expert guidance to clients looking to buy or sell a home. Serving clients throughout South Orange County, Darlene specializes in the senior community of Laguna Woods Village. Darlene works with her clients to ensure the highest level of service, from the beginning of the process right down to the closing table. If you are looking to buy or sell, who you work with really does matter. Call Darlene Mays today.